To set a little background, this took place in western Wyoming. It was a small town, and at the time, maybe about 2,500 people lived there. This was the first home I lived in during the time I spent in Wyoming. We moved here because of my dad's job. My family and I really weren't very enthused. We loved our old home in Oklahoma. My dad and mom went to go looking for houses without us so that we could finish school and so we wouldn't have to stay in a hotel. The housing market was honestly not doing very well, and the available houses were very limited. That's when it all narrowed down to our only choice. The house we ended up moving into was built in the 1930s. It was rather different from the old house that we moved out of. It was a single story with a large basement. The staircase to the basement was immediately to the left when you walked into the front door. There wasn't a door at the bottom. The steps were steep. To make it all that much worse, without the lights being turned on, it was very dark. Within 3 weeks of being told we were moving, we were already moved in. My dad spent the first night there alone and didn't tell us what he actually experienced until years later. Us kids were between about 8 to 13 years old, my brother, sister, and I, so our dad didn't want to scare us at the time. He decided to sleep in the basement because it was fairly large and it had our TV down there. When he described what actually happened later on, he said that it was late, somewhere around 2 a.m. Out of nowhere, the TV turned on by itself. On the screen was pure static. He says that he wasn't bothered by it too much. That changed when he heard a door creak open. And then the footsteps that followed that weren't his own. After doing a little investigating throughout the house, there was nothing that turned up. No indication of what made those noises. He then tried to lay back down, but because of the uncertainty among the strange noises, he didn't get much sleep. Jumping forward some time, this would be my personal first odd experience that would later make me a believer further on in life. Every night, my sister and I would pick a VHS movie from a large bookshelf in the basement, since I was too afraid to sleep in my room, which happened to also be in the basement. We slept in a bunk bed in my sister's room. That night, our mom told us that it was time to put in a movie and go to bed. We agreed and headed downstairs. My first choice was one of my two favorites. I suggested The Land Before Time. Without turning around, I asked my sister, "Does Land Before Time sound good to you?" She must have been ignoring me. She didn't reply. After about a minute, I started to get impatient and say, "Well, how about The Lion King?" Still nothing. I started to get upset as more time passed. "Fine, then if you're not going to say anything, we're going to watch my movie." I slowly turned around to address my sister, but then I see there's no one there. Stranger still, I look back to the large bookcase and see two shadows, plain as day. My shadow, which is to the left, and a smaller shadow, which clearly looks like a little girl on the right. Only that wasn't my sister. This is when I realize something's obviously not right, and I start to freak out. I scream and start running up the stairs. Just in case, I took one final look back. What I saw was the shadow of the little girl. Only now, she's moving down the hallway. She's moving right towards my room. Again, there was absolutely no one in the basement to produce that shadow. I was the only one down there. The shadow disappears into my room. Then, to further top off my fear, the lights come on. I'm screaming bloody murder at this point and run to tell my parents. They tell me it was just my imagination, the typical response when a kid explains something like this. So then I ask where my sister is, since I'm positive it wasn't her down there. Their response? They tell me she's in her room waiting for me to bring a movie up. Apparently, I wasn't alone in seeing a shadow like that. Years later, when my parents told me their experiences, I got told that they both had seen a little girl in the house too. The last thing that happened wasn't to me, it was to my brother. He had a room in the basement and wasn't a chicken like I was. Late one night, he was woken up to his door creaking open. He thought it was me because sometimes I would get scared and go sleep by him. After a few moments, he said he saw a small head peeking through the door. He asked, "What's wrong, buddy? Can't sleep?" The door slowly shuts. He hears footsteps leading down the hall towards my room. Confused, that's when he decided to get up and go see who, or what, he thought was me, is doing. After leaving his room, he saw that my light was on, my door open. Walking into the room, he saw that every single toy from my wooden toy box was laying out. This was incredibly unusual for me. My parents were strict, and I would have gotten in big trouble if I left my room like that. The next day, he asked me what I was doing down in my room so late. I had no idea what he was talking about. My mom even vouched that I was passed out, laying in her room after we all watched movies. To extend on these stories, my brother and I both had recurring dreams about a little blonde girl being stuffed inside my toy box in the closet. Not only that, but we both apparently dreamt that this tall, old man was beating us downstairs in the basement bathroom. We've come to think that maybe a kid was killed in that house. Maybe the negative energy was manifesting. I wanted to take this time to once again thank the authors that have let me read their stories, and to those people that have offered me feedback and support. While I'm still new at this, I hope you enjoyed the story. If you want to show your support, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I want to know what you think, what you personally thought of this video.